Words of Sri Aurobindo from the book Letters on Yoga, Part 1, from the collective works of Sri Aurobindo, Volume 28, page 161, main topic, the higher planes of mind, subtopic, the plane of intuition and the intuitive mind. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says intuition proper is true in itself when not interpreted or altered by mind. Although fragmentary, intuitive mind is mixed with mind and therefore not infallible, because the truth intuition gives may be mixed or imperfectly put by mind. Sri Aurobindo says there is the intuition, and below it there is the intuitive mind, which may have several degrees or layers. Also, there is a partial power of intuition in ordinary mind itself, in the vital, in the physical consciousness, in the material itself. To live in the intuitive, it is necessary first to have the opening into the cosmic consciousness and to live first in the higher and the illumined mind, seeing everything from there. To receive constantly the intuition from above, that is not necessary. It is sufficient to have the sense of the one everywhere and to get into contact with things and people through the inner mind and senses more than the outer mind and senses, for the latter meet only the surface of things and are not intuitive. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says the intuitive mind does not get the touch direct from the supramental. Above it is the overmind, in which there is a higher and greater intuition, and above that are the supermind ranges. Sri Aurobindo says the intuitive mind is a level of consciousness which is touched by the light of higher truths and receives them vividly and conveys them to the consciousness below. Sri Aurobindo says, I do not think it can be said that there are separate strata in the intuitive for purity, strength, and beauty. These are separate powers of the divine, not separate strata. But of course, they can be arranged by the mind in that way for some organized purpose. Next subtopic, yogic intuition and ordinary intuitions. Sri Aurobindo says some people have a faculty of receiving impressions about others which is not by any means infallible but often turns out to be right. That is one thing. And the yogic intuition by which one directly knows or feels what is in a man, his capacities, character, temperament is another. The first may be a help for developing the other, but it is not the same thing. The yogic faculty has to be, and it can be complete only with a great development of the inner consciousness. To have the true intuition, one must get rid of the mind's self-will and the vitals also, their preferences, fancies, fantasies, strong insistences, and eliminate the mental and vital ego's pressure, which sets the consciousness to work in the service of its own claims and desires. Otherwise, these things will come in with force and claim to be intuitions, inspirations, and the rest of it. Or, if any intuitions come, they can be twisted and spoiled by the mixture of these forces of the ignorance. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says intuition is the power of knowing any truth or fact directly without reasoning or sense proof by a spontaneous right perception. Sri Aurobindo says, as for intuition, well, one has to make a distinction, if one can, between a pure intuition and a mixed one. A pure intuition carries in it a truth, even if it is only a fragment or point of truth, and can be trusted. A mixed one carries in it some suggestion of truth, which gets coated with mental matter. Here, one has to use discrimination and separate the true suggestion from the less reliable mental matter. Intuition and discrimination must always go together so long as one mixes in the mental plane and for some time after. Sri Aurobindo says mental intuition, knowledge catches directly some aspect of the truth, but without any completeness or certitude, and the intuition is easily mixed with ordinary mental stuff that may be erroneous. In application, it may easily be a half truth or be so misinterpreted and misapplied as to become an error. Also, the mind easily imitates the intuition in such a way that it is difficult to distinguish between a true or a false intuition. Sri Aurobindo says that is the reason why men of intellect distrust the mental intuition and say it cannot be accepted or followed unless it is tested and confirmed by the intellect. What comes from the overmind intuition has a light, a certitude, an effective force of truth in it that the mental intuition at its best even has not. The correspondent asked, is the knowledge got by samyama of Raja Yoga of the same kind as one would get by intuition? Is the source of the knowledge not the same? For this Sri Aurobindo says yes, but it does not necessarily come from the original source, the plane of intuition. There are mental, vital, subtle physical intuitions as well as intuitions from the higher and illumined mind. Next subtopic, powers of intuitive consciousness. Sri Aurobindo says revelation is a part of the intuitive consciousness. There is a discrimination in the intuitive consciousness that is not intellectual, a direct perception. No, the world of knowledge is composed of several planes. It is from one of them that inspiration comes. Next subtopic, the illumined mind. Sri Aurobindo says intuition is above illumined mind, which is simply higher mind raised to a great luminosity and more open to modified forms of intuition and inspiration. The substance of knowledge is the same in the higher mind and the illumined mind, but the higher mind gives only the substance and form of knowledge in thought and word. In the illumined mind, there begins to be a peculiar light and energy and ananda of knowledge, which grows as one rises higher in the scale or else as the knowledge comes from a higher and higher source. This light are still rather diluted and diffused in the illumined mind. It becomes more and more intense, clearly defined, dynamic and effective on the higher planes, so much so as to change always the character and the power of knowledge. Next subtopic, the higher mind. Sri Aurobindo says the higher mind is a thing in itself above the intellect. It is only when something of its power comes down and is modified in the lower mind, substance, that it acts as part of the intellect. It depends on what is meant by the higher buddhi, whether you use the word to mean the higher part of the intellect or the higher mind. Sri Aurobindo says the higher mind in itself, on its own level, knows, but when it is involved in the ordinary human intelligence and works under limitations, it often does not know, or it has the idea merely that it must be so, but has not the consciousness of its separate existence. The intellect can rise above its ordinary movements and feel itself as a separate power, no longer working under the limitations of the vital and physical mind and the senses. It then begins to reflect something of the action of the higher mind, but without the full freedom and greater light and truth of the higher mind. These are the words of our Lord Sri Aurobindo.